Good afternoon and welcome to yet another episode of Ask Mr. Long Island, the internet program where we discuss issues that need to be discussed to ensure Long Island's vitality and also to draw attention to programs and organizations on the island that help ensure that Long Island becomes or maintains its vitality as a region and sustains itself as an economic engine. Our guest today is Elise Damas.
Damas.
Damas. Damn it. I'm not supposed to say damn it either, but now my friend Timmy Dara is going to get mad at me.
That's okay.
Elise, thank you very much for joining us today. Elise is with an organization called the Central American Refugee Center.
Perfect.
And I learned a lot about it Tuesday night. You guys won an award from the Imagine Awards.
We did. We won the People's Choice Award for the it was the fan favorite, I guess is technically the name at the Imagine Awards.
And the Imagine Awards is the brainchild of Ken Serini and orchestrated by Hillary Sirota Needle of Hillary Needle Events, and they were a guest earlier this year, and they do a terrific job. There was 20 different organizations represented at the Imagine Awards earlier this week, and each story was as compelling as the next. And I could probably do a whole year's worth of programs highlighting the organizations that were talked about Tuesday night that received awards, and which is how we came to know of each other. So I appreciate you being here today, Elise, and I'm very anxious to learn about your organization. But first we got to talk about pizza.
Let's do pizza.
And the reason for that is the one thing that every town on Long Island has in common is a pizza place. As diverse as the regions is, every Long Islander has a favorite pizza place, and the criteria is if you had people coming in from out of town, where would you bring them to show off Long Island's pizza?
Deep breath. Mike, I have lost sleep over this question. I knew that it was coming, and I could not decide what I was going to tell you.
Okay.
So there's a part of me that says Umberto's and Wonton, so let's get it out of the way. I live in Nassau, so
Okay.
Suffolk Pizza, I'm sure there's great pizza. I have no idea about it. I said, well, Umberto's and Wonton is really good. Pietro's in East Meadow. There's Steve Arino's that's also in East Meadow. But then I thought, what pizza place has never, ever let me down? And all through law school, I was effectively sustained by the pizza from Portofino's in Levittown. At least once a week, I would call and order my large pie, no toppings from Portofino. I never, ever had a bad slice there. So that's my vote. It's Portofino's in Levittown.
Well, you did two things. You introduced a phrase that I've never heard, effectively sustained, which is
here
pretty
we go.
cool. But also, you mentioned 4 pizza places.
See how I did that? So I didn't really answer your
beautiful.
question.
All except for Steve Arino has been suggested before.
Has it really?
Yeah, so we're very excited about
Okay,
that.
so now you have to try the others and let
We're
me know
going to
which
add
is
all
best.
4 to the list. Thank you so
Excellent.
much for that. But getting back to your organization and what you do now, you won the Fan Favorite Award.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about your organization and just kind of walk us through how it got started, but also really what you're doing today, which is most important.
Sure. So Creation is celebrating its 32nd year working with Long Island's immigrant community. Its roots, as the name kind of indicates, are in helping refugees fleeing Central America after the civil wars in that region back in the 80s.
Okay.
But one of the really great things about Creation that I think sets it apart from other similar nonprofits is that as times change, as the community's needs change, the organization has been able to adapt to fit the community's needs. So we help people be granted asylum or permanent resident status, 80s, 90s, early 2000s. But as that community then became eligible to apply for naturalization, then we were able to shift our focus towards continuing to serve that community as they make their full transition to U.S. citizens.
When you say that community, who are you referring to? Where are you referring to?
I'm referring to immigrants.
Okay.
One of the great misconceptions about Creation, we call it Creation, is that because the name says Central American, if you're not Spanish speaking and if you're not from Central America, we're going to close our doors to you, which is absolutely not the case. We are very proud to help immigrants from all across the world. I have clients from Pakistan, from Sri Lanka, from Africa, South America, Europe. There's not a continent. I've never had a client from Australia. Not to say that we wouldn't help them, but I've never had one.
Well, it's interesting because at the awards dinner, and we're talking about what your organization does, the woman sitting next to me shared with me that several members of her family were deported back to Poland because they didn't have certain documentation or they didn't have the money, which, and I'm almost embarrassed to share this with you, I did not know that there's a substantial expense involved in becoming a part or becoming a United States citizen.
Absolutely. I mean, immigration in general is expensive, but to become a U.S. citizen, immigration charges $680 for the process.
Wow.
And everybody knows lawyers. Lawyers love to charge money, and so they'll charge, 500, 1,500, just to complete the application.
And is a lawyer absolutely necessary, or it just makes it a lot easier, or?
It depends on the case. If
Okay.
a person has a very clean record, no problems, then we certainly have seen people who have been able to complete the application on their own and successfully become U.S. citizens. But it's always good to have a lawyer because you never really know. Sometimes you have a little complication in your history or something has happened that could ultimately be prejudicial to you even if you don't think it's going to be. So if you can do it with a lawyer, better.
So walk me through the process, if you don't mind. I'm from another country. I hear about these great things in America. How do I get here? How do I get to Long Island? And then what happens next?
Wow, that's a big question.
Okay.
So it depends on where you're coming from. I think, but the root of it is there's this misconception that a person crosses the border or comes on a tourist visa and magically they could say, okay, so now how do I become a citizen? There's got to be this automatic route. Great misconception because there is no route, or there's no path from just kind of getting here to becoming a U.S. citizen. You have to become a resident first, and you can
Okay.
become a resident through a family petition. So my husband's a U.S. citizen, and he petitions for me, my parent, some family member. You can become a resident through work. You become a resident through political asylum. So I'm fleeing my country because of fear of something that might happen to me. You can become a resident through that as well. But then once you're a resident for at least 5 years, that's when you become eligible to become a full-fledged U.S. citizen.
Now, is it safe to say that most of the people who immigrate to the United States have family or friends waiting for them, or the ones that kind of pave the path for them a little bit?
Also a complicated question. I think the majority of immigrants have family here. They're
Okay.
coming to something. That doesn't necessarily mean they have a family member that can help them become a resident. So, I'm from Nicaragua and I come here. I have a sister who's here. I have a cousin who's here, but those family relations might not make it possible for me to become a citizen, or a resident rather.
So what are some of the challenges that an immigrant would face coming to, well, we'll say for Long Island, because that's what you're probably most familiar with?
Well, immigration status is one. I mean, a person who comes undocumented has to then face the challenge of how you go from undocumented to documented, which is a whole nother show.
Okay.
But then there's also the integration into the community. One of the things, as you can tell very clearly by my accent, I'm not from Long Island. And when I came to Long Island, I had this impression that Long Island was synonymous with New York City, that it was
Okay.
basically the exact same thing, exact same community, exact same composition, right? And that the communities on Long Island would receive immigrants the same way people in the city would, which is not what I found. I found that there are many parts of Long Island that are very immigrant friendly and others that are not so immigrant friendly. And so just the simple integration of the community can be very challenging.
Well, what constitutes immigrant friendly?
Immigrant friendly, a community that if you have a brown person living next door to you, that you're
Okay.
going to say, that's okay. A person who, a community where language doesn't create a barrier between people within the community, where there's not the Latino enclave and the Polish enclave and the African enclave. It's where there's a mixture and acceptance across cultural boundaries.
And I would imagine one of the challenges is the resistance, quote unquote resistance, isn't always overt. Sometimes it's a lot more subtle.
Sure, and I think that's absolutely right. And it's another challenge that has to be overcome.
And how do we go about overcoming these challenges?
I mean, I think one of the big ones, and it's what I do every day, is helping immigrants, lawful permanent residents, because the person who becomes a U.S. citizen is a person who is displaying to the U.S. government and to those around them that they are fully committed to the United States, to remaining in the United States, to setting up their lives in the United States. Because you think about it, if you were to go to Kenya, and you don't know if your status there is permanent. Are you going to buy a house? Are you going to set up a business? Are you going to become engaged in your community? I know that I probably wouldn't, because I don't know if my ties are going to be there forever. But if you became a citizen of that country, then all of a sudden you would know, my roots are here, and it's going to make you plant those roots and then have them go deeper. So U.S. citizens, or people who naturalize, are the people who buy the house next door, who join the PTA, who set up the shop on the corner that ultimately enrich the communities in which we live.
Now, I'm going to sound really naive here, but the thing that's always befuddled me, I mean, we are a nation of immigrants. We all descended from immigrants. Even if you came over on a Mayflower, you came over, you were an immigrant.
Right.
And yet, historically, we have not done a great job of welcoming the next wave of immigrants. Why is that? How do we change that? What can be done?
It's a deep question. I mean, you're absolutely right. There has always been the other, right?
I mean, it goes back to the Irish and Italians and all that.
Reading my mind,
Yeah.
exactly. It's the Chinese, it's the Irish,
Sure.
it's the Italians. There's always that new wave of immigrants that the existing population is resistant to. I mean, I think that we need to understand it. We really need to harken back to our roots as a country of immigrants and understand, you know, just because I'm white and I speak English doesn't mean that my family immigrated here in the correct way, right?
Right.
So we need to understand that the people who are coming to this country are looking to achieve the exact same thing that our family did. And I talk to native-born Americans often and say, you know, the person who flees Honduras because they and their children are being threatened with death, and it's a very, very real threat, right? They're coming here looking for safety and security, which is exactly what you would do for your family.
Right.
If somebody threatened my parents, my sister, my children, you best believe that I would go where I had to go to protect myself and to protect them. So what immigrants are doing is no different from what immigrants have done for centuries.
I would imagine as diverse as the population and demographic that you serve, that's probably the one common denominator is this desire to provide exactly what you just described for your family, which is no different than what the people who've been here for generations.
It's 100% correct. You come here because you're looking for a better life, whatever better life means to you, be it security, be it education, be it job opportunities, be it being closer to family. You know, my family is here. I have no family left in my home country. This is where my life is better. That's what all immigrants are seeking, is a better life than the one they currently have.
And let's talk about the population that's here. I mean, they do a lot of the work that a lot of people don't want to do. And the immigrants that I've come across are the hardest working men and women I've ever seen. How big a role do they play in a local economy?
Huge. And it's not just the person who's mowing your lawn, it's also, I believe the CEO of North Shore LIJ is an Irish immigrant, right? So it's important to understand that immigrant does not mean the brown guy who's cutting my shrubs. It means the guy who's administering one of the largest hospital systems in the region. So absolutely, on all levels, they impact the economy in a huge, profound, and very important way.
And the brown guy cutting the shrubs is also it's an honest living and it's a tough work.
Job, yeah, and they do it happily.
Tell us a little bit about what your center does. What kind of services do you provide? How important is it to the immigrants that are coming here?
So Corazon, in our 32 years, has helped thousands and thousands of immigrants obtain work authorization, become residents, and become U.S. citizens. And we have right now on staff 5 different attorneys. We will be 6?
Wow.
We've grown dramatically in the past couple of years just in terms of our legal services capacity. We have 1 attorney who focuses just on family-based immigration. We have 3 attorneys who are dedicated exclusively to working with the refugee children who have come to this region in the last couple of years. And then we have my program, which is Pathway to Citizenship, that helps those lawful permanent residents become full-fledged U.S. citizens.
Tell us a little bit about the children. What's being done there?
A lot. So the children who are coming to this region are primarily coming for one of 2 reasons: to be reunited with family here, or because in I would probably say the vast majority of cases they're fleeing violence and insecurity in Central America. And those children are generally eligible for one of 2 immigration statuses. But the unfortunate fact is we have about 3,000 children who have come to Long Island in the last year.
Wow.
And very, very few attorneys who are working on those cases. So essentially, there are far more children than attorneys to serve them.
Tell me a little bit about the circumstances that they're leaving behind. I mean, how important is it for them to be able to come here?
Oh, it's absolutely, it's a matter of life or death. You have a number of very, very strong, deeply entrenched gangs in Central America, particularly in El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. Gangs that target young people, right? So they see them as the fresh meat. I can get a 12-year-old to run drugs for me. I can get a 12-year-old to run guns or do whatever I need them to do. And they're easily influenced, and they're quick to get around. They can go incognito. And 12-year-olds don't want to run drugs. They don't want to be involved in those things. They want to go to school and lead simple lives and play soccer after class gets out. But they're in a position where they're being told it's join or die.
Wow.
And so you have parents that are here and then are of course saying, I'm not going to leave my 12-year-old to die,
Mm-hmm.
bringing them or sending them. And in many cases, parents are there and sending their children here to other family members in the region because they don't want their 12-year-old to have to face that fate. And it's not just 12-year-olds. I mean, we have 3- and 4-year-olds in our office. We have, kids up to 17, 18, but that to a certain extent are all facing the same insecurity.
So the influx of immigrants is not necessarily part of some sinister plot, but it's really just a manifestation of people wanting what we already have.
I could not have said it better myself. That's
And
absolutely right.
they will do everything they can to maintain that lifestyle.
As any of us would.
Right. And I think that's an important point, though. People who resist the unknown or change, and change is inevitable. I think for them, we talked before about how do we change that acceptance level. I think if there's more of an appreciation for why they're coming here and the role they play in our economy, I really think the Long Island economy would come to a halt if you took the immigrant population out of the equation. But you're not going to get anybody to talk about that because it's some kind of taboo
Right.
subject. That must be very frustrating for you.
It is. It's interesting. I was speaking to somebody yesterday who said a study had been done recently looking at the changing demographics on Long Island. And as we all know, it's very hard for the kind of for Long Island to maintain about 20 to 40-year-olds, get them to buy houses and settle in the region. But they saw that the study showed that the only growth in that particular age demographic was among Latinos. So that population that we need to maintain on Long Island, it's happening, but in terms of Latinos. That's why we need to really support that community even more than we already are, because it really comes down to the economic vitality of the region.
And kind of just to close with that, to tie in what we were discussing earlier, I work with young professionals in the Links organization, and to a person, they shared with me how important diversity is in having a mix of cultures to kind of change the face of Long Island away from this big loaf of white bread that we're known as, and maybe throw in some pumpernickel and some rye and some other things. So, Elise, this has been fascinating. Is there a website that people can go to?
There is. You can go to wordpress
Okay.
.caraceny.com.
Terrific. And it's the Central American Refugee Center. If you want to just Google that, I'm sure you'll find the information that you need.
You're right
The
there.
work you do is terrific. Congratulations again on the award that you received, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you so much for tuning in. This has been another episode of Ask Mr. Long Island. My name is Michael Watt, a.k.a. Mr. Long Island, and we look forward to seeing you next week.